Hi guys, I'm here with my Dreams and Miracles book for you guys again today from Anne Spangler. Here with you guys another true story. I can't remember which one. Oh, Horseshoe Dreams is the one we're reading today. It's not too long. It's shorter than yesterday's. That's a couple pages. It's by Dewey. Let's start out as always by me reading you the introduction. Horseshoe Dreams. Dewey Severs felt his life was over. Only 51, he had a heart condition that prevented him from holding a job. 4 years earlier, he had been strong enough to drive a large team of draft horses. Now he couldn't even pack up a suitcase. Medical bills had forced him into bankruptcy, and he had begun to sleep his life away, unable to fight a way out of his depression. Then in a dream, he heard the clash of metal on metal, felt the tongs against the palm of his hand. Now let's get into the story. I looked out the kitchen window at the Sandia Mountains glowing like embers in the New Mexico sunset. I could hear my wife Carolyn tearing open and unpacking boxes in the living room. She had made me rest a spell, knowing how easily I got winded since my recent heart bypass operation. But gazing at the lush juniper and pinyon trees blanketing the mountain's slopes only made me feel older and more tired. I pushed myself out of my chair and walked to an unopened box lying on its side in the corner. I turned it over with my right hand. My left arm was almost useless due to complications during heart surgery. I picked up a box cutter and sliced through the packing tape, then leaned against the wall, hoping Carolyn couldn't hear me trying to catch my breath. Inside the box were odds and ends and various jobs. Wood planks, nails, horseshoes. Now I am as useless as this old junk, I thought. All my life I had done hard physical labor as a fireman, farmer, milkman, construction worker, and carpenter. My favorite job was as a teamster. I had trained draft horses to show in competitions around the country. Just 4 years earlier, I had been able to drive a 10-mule team easily. Then came 3 heart attacks. The huge medical bills drained our life savings and forced us into bankruptcy. It still made my blood boil to think about the furniture I'd built, the pictures on the walls, even Carolyn's jewelry taken away piece by piece to be sold at auction. We had piled what was left into a ramshackle horse trailer, hitched it to our beat-up truck, and driven from Illinois to New Mexico to be close to our 2 grown sons. Now that we were here, I wanted nothing more than a rock to crawl under, a place to hide from the world of people who could still contribute something to society. I dragged the box of scrap to the garage, then went back inside to rest. Within the week, Carolyn got a bookkeeping job to pay the bills. Watching her running around, getting ready for work one day, I slammed my coffee mug down with all the energy I could muster. "I can't stand this anymore," I shouted. She rushed over to me. "For heaven's sake, what is it, Dewey?" "I'm just a burden on you," I said. "I've lost us everything, and now I'm no good for nothing." She took my face in her hands and looked me straight in the eye. "Dewey, I've never known you to be a quitter. Don't start now." I began looking for work. Most people took one look at my arm and shook their heads. I finally managed to get a carpentry job, but couldn't work fast enough to please the boss, and he let me go. I was too weak to do any of the things I was trained in, and had never worked in an office. At 51, I had lost my health, my money, and my pride. What did I have left? Carolyn kept encouraging me, but I got more and more depressed. I thought back to other hard times I'd been through. When I left home at age 16 and began working 7 days a week, barely able to keep my eyes open before collapsing on a cot at night. I still had made the time to go to church every Sunday. The Lord got me through those tough months. After I married Carolyn and life smoothed out, I guess I sort of put God on a shelf. Now times were rough again, and I needed God's guidance more than ever. But when I tried to pray, all that seemed to come of it was more self-pity. What's the point of me living anymore, Lord? I wondered. I started sleeping all the time. Carolyn would get home from work, and I would try to get me out of the house, if only to walk across the field between our house and the mountains. You can't just lie around all day, Dewey, she said. It's not like you. She never pushed me about working, but sometimes she'd coax me out and drives through the countryside, and I can feel the tension between us. Lord, I prayed, show me what to do. One spring afternoon, I awoke before Carolyn came home. I'd had the strangest, most vivid dream. I rarely remembered more than bits and pieces of dreams, if anything, but that time I recalled everything in incredible detail. I was striking a horseshoe with a pair of tongs, shaping it into something. I didn't know exactly what. I could still feel the coolness of the tongs against my palm, hear the clash of the metal on metal. The sensation of physical labor, even in a dream, was wonderful. The next day, I awoke with an image lingering in my mind of a cowboy and a mule sculpted out of a horseshoe. I hastily sketched the image on a piece of paper, then tucked it away in a drawer. But the next night and the next, I again dreamed of making sculptures by splitting and folding horseshoes. One day, after Carolyn went to work, instead of retreating to bed, I pried open the rusty lid of my toolbox and found a blacksmith hammer. I went out to the garage where an old anvil I had used in my teamster days stood behind some empty boxes. I dragged it to the center of the garage, my heart pounding from the exertion. Then I picked out a horseshoe from the box of scrap. Lifting the hammer high in my right hand, I swung at the metal. Whang! The cold steel was hardly dented. I swung a few more times, accomplishing little more than giving myself a whopping headache. What made me think I could do this anyway? You're a fool, Dewey, that's all I thought. But the dreams kept coming. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and sketch the images I'd seen. One day, I dragged myself out to the garage again and stood staring at the dented horseshoe on the anvil. It's so clear, I thought, visualizing the cowboy I wanted to make. I took a deep breath and pounded that stubborn metal for about half an hour, often resting. The aches in my muscles afterward actually felt good, as though unused parts of me were coming back to life. It had been months since I'd felt so strong. That evening, I told Carolyn about the dreams. I just feel like I have to make these things. I don't know why. She eagerly scourged up more horseshoes from our moving boxes. Each day, I fought and fiddled with the metal, driven by the images I'd seen the night before. After a few weeks, I finished a crude metal sculpture of a cowboy. I showed it to Carolyn. "This is wonderful," she said, hugging me. "I told you you'd find something to do. You should try to sell it." Sell it? Who would buy a mangled-up horseshoe from an old teamster? I thought. I didn't think of it as art. Just as something I did to get me out of bed. I visited a local farrier to get more horseshoes. When I showed him my sculpture, he gave me a broken forge that I repaired with it. I could heat the metal so it was easier to shape. I was getting stronger every day, energized by the dreams and by the work. After a few months of experimenting, I completed a dozen statues. I used scrap metal to fill in small details. Carolyn kept pushing me to try and sell them. My friends at work love the one on my desk, she said. We need the money, so I finally gave in. One Saturday morning, we packed my dream sculptures into a dusty suitcase and drove to Albuquerque's old town. At the first store, I laid out 10 sculptures on the counter in front of the manager. Your grandkids make these, he asked me. Embarrassed, I shoved the statues back into the suitcase, and we hurried out. I started showing just one to whomever was at the cash register. We got the boot from store after store. It ate at my pride to walk down the sidewalk beside Carolyn, allowing her to lug around the heavy suitcase. Last try, I whispered to Carolyn as we walked into the treasure house, a tiny shop jammed from floor to ceiling with novelty gifts and crafts. The man at the counter turned out to be the store owner. I carefully set down two of my creation. One was of a cowboy sitting under a windmill, reading the deed in his hand, and the other of a cowboy putting up barbed wire fence. The owner picked them up and looked them over. What are they made of? He asked gruffly. Some old horseshoes. He eyed me sharply. You make these? Yep, I said. My toes squirmed in my boots. I'll take 'em, the owner replied. Have any more? Carolyn and I dug out the rest of the sculptures, then we left the shop. The suitcase was light enough for me to carry. I went to work with new gusto, the clanging of my hammer on metal sounding like music. Soon, instead of shaking me awake in the evenings, Carolyn had to coax me into bed at night. I continued to sell my pieces to local shops and got a booth at the New Mexico State Fair. We became regulars there, and in 1995 won an award. That year, we even sold enough sculptures so Carolyn could quit her job. Then 2 years ago, specialists at the University of New Mexico Hospital helped me regain use of my left arm. Today, I make about 10 cowboys a day, 6 days a week. Carolyn runs the business side of things, and I still get some of my best sculpture ideas from dreams. When my old life fell apart, I thought my best days were behind me. Now I see there was a new life waiting to take shape. God gave me the tools, the skills, and the vision. All I had to do was follow my dreams. And that was Horseshoe Dreams by Dewey. And after I got about halfway into that story, I remembered reading it in a book I had. I think I had a book on, I read about him and told what happened to him and everything, because I remember reading this about him making those horseshoes and stuff. So I'm like, oh, I've read this story before. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's story. And tomorrow's, if God willing, we get to read it tomorrow. Let me check here real quick. It will be looks like it'll be another 2-pager. It might be a little bit shorter than this one. It might be a little bit shorter than today's. But God willing, I hope you guys are enjoying the stories. And God willing, I'll see you guys tomorrow with another one. Let's bring those souls to Jesus, guys. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Bye, guys. God bless.